Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We are at 6:02. So thanks for joining us. You're joined Connecticut for Animals Education Fund, and tonight we are presenting an educational webinar on understanding animal cruelty in Connecticut. I am Dr. James Lombella. I'm the CEO, President for Connecticut for Animals Education Fund, and I'm here with Colette. And Colette, go ahead. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good evening, and thank you all for attending. We're so happy to be here with some wonderful speakers. I'm Colette Griffin. I'm the Connecticut for Animals Board Chair and Administrative Law Judge sitting in Waterbury, Connecticut. I'm also a past advocate in animal cruelty cases. And thanks again for being with us.
Excellent. Thanks, Colette. We're going to go ahead and start off here. All right. So welcome, everybody. What we're going to cover today. I want to start off by thanking the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut. They are the sponsors of our webinar this evening. I'm going to do a quick introduction to Connecticut for Animals Education Fund, let you know how you can get involved. Then we're going to have our guest speakers, Joshua Levin, Legislative and Advocacy Manager for CT Votes for Animals, Attorney Joyce Glass, Courtroom Attorney Advocate under Desmond's Law, and Zilla Canemelia, President of Desmond's Army Animal Law Advocates. Then we will have a wrap up and a Q&A as time permits at the end of the webinar. A couple quick housekeeping tips. I'll ask everyone, please mute your microphone if it was not automatically muted when you joined. I want everyone to know the webinar is being recorded and will be available on our CFA YouTube channel to review and share. Please use the Q&A button to load any questions, and we will review the questions and during our Q&A as time permits at the end of the webinar. And the one ask I do have is to share the education that you learned today with your family, friends, and neighbors, and pass it along for the animals. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. CFA's vision, Connecticut for Animals Education Fund strives to cultivate a compassionate society where animals are valued and their rights are respected, fostering a culture of empathy and responsibility toward all living beings. Please check out our website, ctforanimals.org, where you can learn how we empower, engage, educate, and collaborate. I also want to make a note today that this summer we launched April of 2024. So we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary as a new organization a few months ago. With that, I want to thank our board, our leadership team here. Without their vision and passion, CFA would not be in existence. Together for Animals is our tagline, and there's a couple pictures I want to share here as we go. Here's our website. Please check out the website. You can check out our newsletters, our upcoming events. You can support our work. Our website's full of all kinds of educational materials. We have fact sheets. We have a toolkit. We have our educational videos, and this is where you will find this evening's video once it's loaded after it's recorded. And we have all of our fact sheets, everything from pollinators to cats to body crushing leg hole traps, coexisting with animals, wildlife, SGARs, neonic poisons, peaceful coexistence with bears, and more. So we do cover the full spectrum. Our website will also let you know what events we are attending, how to volunteer, and how you can work with us. So please check out our website when you have a moment. A quick picture collage of what we've been doing the last 15 months here in Connecticut. These past 2 summers, we have attended multiple events. We have talked with thousands of individuals. The picture here is us sponsoring the Dinner on the Diamond in Bristol when they were going to do the geese roundup and euthanize the geese in Bristol. And they've now implemented a non-lethal plan, I'm happy to say. More pictures of us across Connecticut at all the different events, engaging with the community, sharing education, and so forth. And one of the things, make sure you download and get a digital version of our resource guide. All of our fact sheets, all of the topics are all covered under one cover, and all of the issues there. And watch for this spring, because we're in the process right now of putting out our 2026 resource action guide coming up here this spring. With that, I also want to make folks aware that we have available on CFA's website. A must-watch really goes hand in hand with tonight's presentation. We had an educational webinar on preventing animal abuse. We're very fortunate that one of our board members, Dr. Virginia Maxwell, is a professor and assistant chair of forensic science at the University of New Haven. Virginia is also credited with developing the first graduate program in animal cruelty and investigation at the university, and she's also a co-author of one of the first books on animal cruelty and investigation. So please watch this. It's an hour and a half. The things I learned in this video and in this presentation from Dr. Maxwell really educated me. So just sharing that as a resource that's available. couple slides that I stole from Dr. Maxwell's presentation with her permission, of course. The link, you're going to hear a lot about the National Link Coalition, 40 years worth of research and data, really just identifying the correlations between animal abuse, child abuse, neglect, domestic violence, elder abuse, and other forms of violence. We have known this for many, many years that they're linked together, but this is an organization that has the data, really shows the human-animal bond, why we should care about the link, how it's linked to domestic violence, at-risk adults, children, interpersonal violence, and more. Here are some of the statistics they share, and this was staggering to me when I look at all of the statistics here. 70% of people charged with cruelty to animals who were known by police for other violent behaviors, including homicide. You can go all the way up to 100%, 100% of all sexual homicide perpetrators who had history of animal cruelty. So we know this link exists. We've known it for a long time. For Dr. Maxwell, also, this slide really hit home for me. 6.5 years old is the age at which childhood acts of animal cruelty begin to emerge. And animal cruelty is one of the earliest signs of a conduct disorder. Another one of Dr. Maxwell's slides is Margaret Mead, an American anthropologist. She was very popular and did a lot of presentations and speaking. She was talking about this during the 60s. One of the most dangerous things that can happen to a child is to hurt an animal and to get away with it. Margaret Mead. So the 60s. So folks, we've been talking about this for 50, 60 years. We've known this link exists. So tonight you're going to hear a lot about the National Coalition link as well. So please, I ask you to dive into that. Tonight is all about education. I've had a lot of emails from members passionate about this topic, and we understand that there's a lot Connecticut has done. There's a lot more Connecticut needs to do. And tonight really is kind of a dive into that. So with that, Colette, I'll hand over to you. We'll start off with our first presenter.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'm very happy to welcome Joshua Levin to be our first speaker of the evening. Joshua is the Legislative and Advocacy Manager for Connecticut Votes for Animals. His role is multifaceted and involves policy research, strategic planning, and coalition building, facilitating education outreach initiatives that are to increase the understanding of and participation at the state legislative level. Thank you so much for being with us, Joshua.
Thank you, Colette, for that warm introduction. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing a few topics, including CVA's 2025 survey results that point directly to animal abuse and neglect as being the top animal welfare concern for Connecticut residents. Going to touch upon the significant increase in animal cruelty charges from 2023 to 2024, and then talk about the major strides forward that Connecticut has taken to address animal welfare concerns. So earlier in the year, CVA published a survey that has largely shaped our legislative agenda. The purpose of the survey was to gain an understanding of what the most important animal-related issues are for our residents, and overwhelmingly, the answer was animal cruelty. 91% of respondents said that they want Connecticut to take more action regarding animal cruelty. 69% said that it is the most important issue for them. And 58% said that animal cruelty is the most important learning opportunity. Additionally, 84% of respondents believe that not enough is currently being done to address their top concern. So much and more certainly needs to be done to address animal cruelty, but that doesn't mean that Connecticut hasn't started down the right path. This annual report here, published by the Animal Legal Defense Fund, shows how Connecticut between 2022 and 2023 rose through the ranks from 31 to the 11th most protective state in the country in terms of animal cruelty. And that is because of three key pieces of legislation that they passed in that year. The first of which was they closed a legal loophole and clearly defined sexual assault of animals. Secondly, they created a mandatory 5-year possession ban of animals for those who have been convicted of certain animal-related offenses. And third, it required veterinarians to report suspected animal cruelty. While these are major strides, they are just the beginning. And this is made abundantly clear in the report published by the Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. This report goes in depth on the percentage of certain offenses. And here you will see how animal cruelty between 2023 and 2024, the amount of charges increased by 36.7%. Of all of the offenses listed in this report, animal cruelty offenses increased the most. And this increase is extremely alarming and highlights the need for Connecticut to take greater action in addressing animal cruelty. Our following guest speakers will provide a more in-depth understanding of this need and what can be done. And before we get to them, I wanted to quickly just provide you all with an understanding of what CVA's 2026 legislative priorities are. The first of which is to address animal cruelty. That means that includes, but is certainly not limited to, supporting efforts to expand Connecticut's animal cruelty education program and expanding Desmond's law. We're also going to continue to support the initiative to ban the use of poisons, including SJRs and neonicotinoids. We thought that 2025 was going to be the year that this would finally pass, but unfortunately the bill did not make it to the finish line. And of course, we are going to continue to support other pro-animal welfare legislation as they come up, including, but again, not limited to, the following topics that you see here. These are just some of the more prominent. Before we move on, I did just want to put you all in the know about the 2025 legislative scorecard that CBA is going to be publishing shortly. This scorecard provides a comprehensive report of all of our legislators and their voting record for key animal-related bills. This report will be published shortly, and I implore you all to, if you haven't already, sign up for CBA's action alerts. You can use the QR code right here, which will provide you all with the website for signing up for our alerts. So thank you all so much, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Our next speaker, I'm also so happy to warmly welcome this evening, is Attorney Joyce Glass. Joyce has dedicated the last 14 years of her career protecting animals from cruelty and neglect. In 2007, Joyce founded her pro bono legal practice to accomplish her singular goal of providing for animal and human welfare. Joyce's mantra is known to be addressing animal cruelty makes our communities safer. And Joyce, I'm sure we'll get into why that mantra is especially telling and has to do with the link. So I'm excited to hear that. In Connecticut, Joyce serves as an attorney appointed under the Desmond's law for animal cruelty cases. Joyce handles both felonies and misdemeanors, including appearing before pretrial hearings and all levels of the litigation regarding animal cruelty cases. More recently, Joyce has expanded her practice to the Morrisville, North Carolina area, and we're sorry when she leaves the state, but where she contributed to legislation to prohibit the sale of animals in parking lots. The legislation was enacted in March of 2025. With that, I'll turn it over to Joyce Glass. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Colette, and good evening. I'm going to speak to you about what Desmond's law is, what the role of attorney advocates are under the law, and give some examples of cases that I have worked on so that you can understand what happens in the real world with the law. Next slide. In 2016, Connecticut became the first state in the nation to pass a Courtroom Animal Advocate Program. It's called Desmond's Law, and it permits attorney advocates to be appointed in animal cruelty cases or civil forfeiture actions involving animal victims that are dogs or cats. The attorney advocate role in the case is to speak and act, quote, in the interest of justice, and the statute lays out the role and the actions that the attorney advocates are permitted to take. Next slide. And next slide. But what is the role of the animal advocate in these cases? What does it mean to act and work in the interest of justice? And it means a couple of things. It means first that the attorney advocate has to tell the story about what happened in the case. It's not just the story of the snapshot of time that led to the charges being filed, but it's also what happened prior to the abuse and then after the abuse to the victim, whether or not they survived, what the consequences were. It's also to establish the pattern of behavior of the defendant, not only during the abuse, but in prior instances. So that can be reported to the court. And it's also to highlight the human connection. In every one of these cases, there's always a human connection. It could be a child, it could be a domestic violence victim, it could be an elderly person, it could be the community at large. And in order to tell that story and report to the court, the attorney advocate has to interact with any number of stakeholders. It could be the animal control officer who was first on scene, seized the animal, and did a report. It could be law enforcement who has body cam footage that needs to be looked at and the timestamps noted and what statements were made. It could be the vet who examined the animal, did blood work, took x-rays, and also did a report. It could be looking at pending or closed cases that the defendant was involved in and going to those courts to pull the files. It could mean speaking to witnesses and getting affidavits filed with the court. When all of that information is gathered, it's provided to the parties in interest, which of course always includes the court, prosecutor, and the defense attorney. And we do that because as attorney advocates, we are creating a record. And when we create the record in court or we speak in pretrial, we want to have the facts to back up what we are saying. And we create the record not just for that case, to create precedent in the state, and also to provide documentation and support for any legislation to amend a bill or to have a new bill proposed. Next slide. So I wanted to run through a couple of the cases that I have handled in the state of Connecticut so you can get an understanding of what the attorney advocates do. The first case is Axel, very clearly a handsome Siberian Husky. Axel was brought into the home where he resided when he was 8 weeks old. The home consisted of the defendant, his significant other, and 2 children. When Axel was about 7 months old, a concerned community member filed a report with animal control that Axel was seen limping for several weeks. Animal control went out to the defendant's place of business where the dog was located. The defendant initially told them that Axel had gone into the woods about 2 weeks prior to play and came out limping, and he had not taken him to the vet. He was directed to take him to the vet, but the animal control officer in that case also contacted the neighboring animal control officer, which was the town where the defendant resided. The animal control officer went to the home. The defendant was not there, and as they were leaving a notice, one of the neighbors came out and they said, "We have heard the dog being abused, and in fact, we have a video." So at this point, this was about March or April of the year that this case took place, and the video was from January. So the animal control officer asked for the video to be turned over. It was turned over, and what you could see on the video was Axel sitting outside the house. The defendant comes out, drags him over to the car, puts duct tape around his snout, drags him into the car, and you can't see what's happening, but you hear the dog yelping from being beaten. The defendant then gets out of the car, leaves the dog in the back, and drives away. At about the same time that animal control got this video, they received a call from an emergency vet in the state of Connecticut saying that a dog had been brought in. The story that they were being told did not line up with the injuries they were seeing. The injuries that they saw on x-ray were that the dog had 8 fractures on his leg in various stages of healing from weeks to months old. That dog happened to be Axel. And at that time, then the defendant was charged with animal cruelty. The dog was surrendered and he went into a foster home, which is the accepted protocol in these cases. And what happened next was the defendant tried to argue that Axel, they just got Axel, and that whatever injuries he had were from his prior owner. But the animal control officer in this case did his homework, and he had found the vet that originally saw Axel when he was 8 weeks old as a puppy, and the owner is listed as the defendant. So from there, I then worked with the vet, animal control officer, and the foster family for a couple of months because the goal was to save Axel's leg. And they tried a lot of different things. Unfortunately, the leg could not be saved. Next slide, please. And the determination was made to amputate his leg, which would be better for him. So I did put a content warning. The next slide is Axel post-op. Next slide, please. I asked for this picture to be taken so that we could submit it to the court, because it's one thing for an attorney advocate to get up in court and tell the court the injuries of the victim. But it's another thing for the court to actually see what the consequences are of the defendant's actions towards an animal that did nothing wrong. At the time that this was submitted to the court, the video had not been watched by the judge. It was in the file, but it was never brought to his attention. So during one of the pre-trials, I distinctly remember this, that we were supposed to go out to the hearing, and court was waiting. And I said to the judge, you have to watch the video. And he did. So what happened in this case was Axel was adopted by his foster family. He's a super sweet dog. I got to meet him twice during the case. The defendant in this case did receive accelerated rehabilitation. That is unfortunately a common outcome in the state of Connecticut. We did put conditions on that accelerated rehabilitation where he couldn't have animals for a certain period of time, and he did have to pay restitution. But one other fact of this case was that the two children that were in the home witnessed the abuse during the time that it was happening. So the significance of that is we know that a child's exposure to the treatment of animals, positive or negative, informs how they treat people and animals well into adulthood. It's one of the reasons why we have the cross-reporting law in the state of Connecticut. And it's very unfortunate that they were witness to that. Next slide. So this is the case of Buddy before and after. This was a side-by-side comparison given to me by the animal control officer in this case. The picture on the left is Buddy the day after his abuse. He clearly does not look very happy. His face is very withdrawn. The picture on the right is a couple of months later after he was obviously removed and he was in a foster home. And I think a lot of times if people ask why advocates do the work that they do, I think this picture kind of gives the explanation as to why, because obviously it impacted his life a lot. But Buddy's story is something that is a very common fact pattern that we see about power and control with an abuser. Buddy's owner was unhappy that his spouse did not pick up her phone at work. And so what he did was he put a shocker collar on Buddy and he continuously shocked him. Buddy suffered burn marks on his neck. He was biting his tongue and it was bleeding. And as he was trying to get away, either from the defendant or because he was trying to get away from the pain, there were bloody paw prints throughout where the rooms that he was in. And that's the body cam. Basically, almost looks like a murder scene from what he suffered. So at this tail end of this abuse situation, the spouse comes to the house, returns home from work, the defendant leaves and she calls law enforcement and the dog is removed. The child of the couple was in the home while this happened. There were many pretrial conferences in this case. And the judge in the case wanted the victim, he wanted to hear from the victim. So I contacted her through her divorce attorney, requesting that she make a statement, but with the understanding that this was obviously a very delicate situation. She was extremely brave. She did come to court with a victim's advocate. I can tell you that you could hear a pin drop in the courtroom that day as she detailed the abuse that she suffered, what Buddy suffered, and what another dog in the home had suffered as well. We did know that there was another dog, but we were not able to find out any information about that dog. So what happened was after the hearing, I did speak to her. I showed her the before and after picture so that she could understand that her call to law enforcement was really saved this dog's life. And I did ask her if there was anyone that could corroborate the story about the prior dog. She was able to put me in touch with a former neighbor who could tell me what she heard between the hedges of their houses that they had lived in several years prior. And it was the same pattern of behavior. If the defendant was angry, she would hear him yelling, and then that dog would also get a shocker collar put on him, and he would be continuously shocked. In that case, regarding that dog, the victim was able to remove the dog from the house and told the defendant that the dog ran away. But what he did was he went out and got another dog, which was Buddy. So in this case, like I said, there was a lot of back and forth because there was a very clear pattern of behavior. This was not someone that should have an animal. Unfortunately, in the state of Connecticut, we are no longer permitted to ask for a lifetime ban. A law was passed several years ago that limits that to 5 years. It is not a piece of legislation that I am in favor of because the 5 years should be a floor, not a ceiling. However, what happened in the end of this case was we went back and forth so much that I was able to get a provision added to the order of protection for the length of the order of protection, which is 25 years, that he was not allowed to have animals. So we didn't get 5 years, we got 25, and that is now precedent in the state. So I was happy with that outcome, although the defendant did not have to plead to animal cruelty. Next slide. The last case is the Philip Lynn matter, which is was a very lengthy case, so I will just give you the highlights. From the time that Philip Lynn killed the first animal that we know about to his sentencing was nearly 3 years. This was a really long case. He had other victims in other states that were human. And basically what happened with this case was in early 2022, a social worker went to Philip Lynn's home. His mother told the social worker that he had killed a dog by punching it in the face, and then it drowned in a bathtub. That social worker did report that to law enforcement. 2 months later, another social worker went to the house, and the mother told that social worker that he killed another dog. That dog, he snapped the dog's neck with a leash. There were allegations that he had killed other animals and sexually abused another dog, but he was only charged with 2 felony animal cruelty counts. He almost immediately violated the conditions of his release. He was then given an ankle monitor, which he did wear. But when he realized that most likely he was going to serve jail time, he took it off and fled. He held the case up for 6 months. He was found the day after Thanksgiving, 2023, hiding in a closet in his mother's home, at which time he was incarcerated without bail. But about a year into this case, I was going through the file, and there were notations about a pending case in Vermont. No one seemed to know what that case was about, so I picked up the phone one day and I was able to reach the prosecutor on that case. The state of Vermont had no idea that Philip Lynn had been charged with felony animal cruelty, which was after the charges that he was charged with in Vermont. At that time, he had entered into a plea deal, but it had not yet been approved by the court. There were 21 charges. One of them involved assaulting an elderly woman and another luring a 13-year-old on Snapchat. After the court in Vermont learned about the felony animal cruelty charges, they decided not to approve the plea agreement, and Philip Lynn was going to have to go back to Vermont to face all the charges. I was able to get the entire file, which I turned over to the court and the prosecutor. I can tell you that the portion of the file that talked about the 13-year-old was probably some of the most disgusting thing that I have ever read. So, of course, when I created the record in this case, I made sure to point out that he was targeting the most vulnerable of society, a child, an elderly person, and animals. He was sentenced to jail in Connecticut in December of 2024. That is not something that we often get in these cases, so I was very happy with that. Also, Vermont will be extraditing him for the charges in Vermont. That's also not something that we see very often because most jurisdictions do not want to incur the cost of that. Next slide. Animal cruelty does not occur in a vacuum. I say this a lot. You are not an animal abuser and then everything else in your life is going perfect. There is always a human connection. It has been in every single case that I have ever worked on. for 14 years. It is one of the things that we speak about in court all the time as part of our role to act in the interest of justice. Next slide. How can Desmond's Law be more effective? So very recently, the data that has been collected by Desmond's Army since the law went into effect was analyzed. And one of the statistics that came out of that shows that 60% of the victims in Connecticut are dogs and cats. But the other 40% are horses, goats, sheep, birds, bearded dragons, turtles. And so currently under the law, attorney advocates can only be appointed if the victim is a dog or cat. But that doesn't capture the other 40%. And so there have been some cases where attorney advocates have been appointed in cases that involved animals other than dogs and cats, but that's not the norm. And I have been turned down on cases that I have applied for because of that. So I put at the bottom of the slide, animal abusers do not only victimize dogs and cats. So you're not capturing that other 40% that where an advocate, could be acting in these cases. So that's one change that can be made legislatively to make the law more effective. Next slide. So I will leave you with this. When animals crimes are prosecuted, our communities are safer. So I've said this a lot over the years, but I said it at a press conference several years ago, and someone asked me to kind of expand on it. So what it means is that, when these cases are taken seriously, when the story is told to the court, when they're prosecuted properly, that's when we can get the best resolution in these cases, where we can have consequences that can actually act as deterrents so that we can stop a cycle, stop the escalation, and we are not permitting animal cruelty from becoming a gateway crime to human violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very, very insightful, and we appreciate your being here with us. Our next speaker, I'm also very glad and warmly welcome, Zilla Canamella, has managed the same private horse boarding and training facility for almost 30 years. She has specialized in trail ride training that combines both horses and dogs. She is the president and co-founder of Desmond's Army, Animal Law Advocates, which you've heard about this evening, dedicated to strengthening animal protection laws and ensuring accountability in cruelty cases. At home, Zilla is happily owned by her 3 horses, 3 huskies, and 3 cats, all of whom are rescues. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm Zilla, as Colette introduced me, and I would first like to thank Connecticut For and Connecticut Votes for Animals for having us on this webinar tonight. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is simple but vital. We are dedicated to raising awareness, advocating for stronger laws, supporting enforcement, and educating the public about animal cruelty and its connection to human violence. Animals are sentient beings and deserve the protection of the law. In addition to tracking animal cruelty cases across the state, next slide, please. We notify approved advocates of cases and attend courts throughout Connecticut. We educate the public on the connection of animal cruelty and domestic violence, social violence, and other predatory acts. We provide municipalities with funding for necropsies, DNA tests that aid in prosecution. We also help pay medical expenses for victims of animal cruelty during open investigations and provide reward funds. You may have seen those online in the news. That's for information leading to the arrest and prosecution of individuals responsible for abandonment or cruelty. Our newest initiative is to pay for the first month's boarding cost for pets of domestic violence victims entering licensed safe house facilities. That is who we are. This is why we do what we do. Here are some forms of animal cruelty: abandonment, Trooper Mo. This dog in New Haven, some of these you may recognize. Too often, animals are cast off like garbage, tied to benches, left in the woods, chained to trees, and left to die. Many are already emaciated or sick, and need vet care. Sometimes food and water are left behind. You'll see like the bunny there was left with some food. That does not make it okay. We need to be perfectly clear that leaving food and water does not make abandonment okay. It is still cruelty and it is still against the law. Then we come to neglect. And you'll see pictures of, that's a dog's foot with the nails that have started to curl. We've actually seen them worse where they were spiraled around and the dog could not walk. This is lack of empathy, choosing not to see the suffering of another living being. Even schadenfreude, which is the pleasure of watching them suffer. Lack of priority. Animals' needs are dismissed or unimportant. People are busy. It's no excuse. And then there's lack of knowledge or affordability. More excuses that do not erase the harm caused. On the bottom picture, that is actually a standard poodle standing up. When we got this picture, the initial picture is the dog laying on its side. We're not going to show that. Laying on its side, and you really would have thought the dog had passed. Starvation really should be a felony. This person with this poodle received a diversionary program. You cannot walk past a living being and not know it needs sustenance. Denying food and water is not only intentional, it's a malicious act of cruelty. They need to eat and drink. It's plain and simple. Next. Hoarding. Boy, we have a lot of hoarding in Connecticut, right? There's a lot of hoarding all over the United States. But on the left, you'll see a case that is still pending. That's Desnoyers. You see the dogs, what it's living in. And on the right is Connolly. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of animals are kept in horrific conditions. It often stems from mental illness, but the suffering is extreme. And the outcomes to the animals are obviously devastating. I don't know how they can move. I myself took a dog in from a hoarding case, and she was so grateful to be able to move around, to be able to be outside. It was really quite heartbreaking to watch the transformation. Nearly every hoarder in Connecticut is granted a diversionary program, which we've learned is not appropriate because diversionary programs, and this is going to be, I'll probably sound like a broken record, but diversionary programs were created for those not likely to reoffend. Hoarding has nearly a 100% repeat rate when left unchecked without consequences. And we will go to violent acts and dog fighting. Violent acts. Beatings. Convicted in February of 25. There was a case of Naisha Squeglia, who was caught on a neighbor's security camera beating her 1-year-old puppy to death for a full 15 minutes. This happened in Bridgeport. She was incarcerated. She still is incarcerated. That case did have an advocate on it, and without the advocate, they were actually talking about a diversionary program. So the advocate, helped to adjudicate this to jail time. And then there's shootings. I mean, we have shootings of dogs in Connecticut all the time. Resulting in death, Singletary and Derby, Champion and Waterbury, and McElrath and Southington. That's just to name a few. And torture. It's a hard one. Paco, a family German Shepherd. And I have to use the word allegedly, but I've read the warrant. And this dog, the torture was, it's too heinous to detail, and it was by another family member. The docket is currently sealed, which means a diversionary program is being considered for this. And when I say egregious, you can't even imagine what this dog endured. And yeah, bestiality, another one. The violent act of raping an animal. That too happens here in Connecticut. Next. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the dog fighting. Can we go back to the dog fighting? Because it does occur here. It's not just somewhere else. Dogs are forced to fight for sport and killed when they're no longer useful. I've actually used that number at the hotline, and it's a good number. HSUS does investigate. They contact the state police, and it's a better liaison than, say, going to DOAG or the police department. So if you suspect dog fighting, please call that number, 1-800-847-4787. Thank you. Next. And here it is. It's where the human link is the strongest. The link between animal cruelty and human violence. Abusers use pets as leverage. If you leave, I will hurt the dog. If you leave, I will kill the dog. We've actually heard these recordings in defendants' statements. Those who witness cruelty and violence at home suffer trauma that lasts a lifetime. And we know that children who witness animal abuse and cruelty go on to do it themselves. It's part of the cycle of violence. Survivors often delay leaving because they can't take their pets with them. We believe this is not just an animal welfare issue, it is a family safety issue as well. According to the National Animal Welfare Institute, 89% of domestic violence survivors reported that their partner harmed or threatened a pet as a tool for manipulation. As a survivor of domestic abuse, I can tell you this is 100% true. 40 years ago, my dog was shot and killed in retaliation. Next. Our data and case trends. This is alarming in Connecticut. 2023, 129 cases, and then in 24, you'll see 164 cases, which is a 20.37% increase. And then in 2025, 145 cases, which is on track to being 250 cases for the year by the year's end. This is It's troubling. It's extremely troubling. Next. The protection laws. Cross-reporting between agencies. This is where DCF and animal control, if they go into a home, they are mandated to report animal abuse. If it's DCF, if animal control goes in, they are mandated to report to DCF if there's kids in the home and there's animal cruelty, or vice versa. The Good Samaritan law, there's a good way to do that. There's a correct way to do that. What you do is if an animal is in distress, and I stress that, if the animal is in distress, you call the police, you record the temperature, you document everything. And this can be done very quickly. Before any more harm comes to the animal, you tell the police you are breaking the window to get into the car, that there's an animal in distress and they need to get there immediately. And again, document everything. Desmond's law, we know what Desmond's law is. It puts a pro bono attorney in court to advocate for justice in an animal cruelty case. And the tethering and sheltering of dogs. Dogs are to be on an 8-foot, no shorter than an 8-foot tether, and they are not to be tethered for more than 15 minutes in cases of weather advisories. The sheltering of dogs, the shelter must be at least 2 inches off the ground. The dog must be able to sit, lie down, turn around, so it has to accommodate the dog's size, and it must be insulated against the weather. The animal cruelty update is these are 3 laws that they're all steps in the right direction. And the bestiality law before 2023 could not be charged. And we had 2 cases of it prior to it becoming a law. It was on the books as simply bestiality. There was no language to the law. It's now chargeable, but it's only a misdemeanor. Raping an animal should be a felony. It's common sense tells us this law needs to be fixed. The 5-year ownership ban, it's a good law. It's a good law. But as Joyce had mentioned before, it should be a floor, not a ceiling. The courts are hesitating to use it due to lack of education on the law. The language is vague and enforcement is unclear. And again, although this is a good and necessary law, it needs some revision. Mandatory veterinary reporting for suspected dog fighting. Does anybody think that a dog fighter actually takes their dog to a veterinarian? I don't think so. It's meaningless. Dog fighters don't go to veterinarians. They use kitchen table butchers. We've had one in court. If it had been proposed, it actually was proposed as a good law with mandatory vet reporting on suspected cruelty cases. So this law really needs to be rethought. And, again, if an animal is being abused at home, often a human is as well, and veterinarians could very well be considered a first line of defense in domestic violence. If a a victim is bringing their dog to a vet because it's been injured by a partner, what's going on at home? So, the full language of all these laws you can find under resources on our website. Next, prosecution challenges. We see a lot of people calling for more laws or stricter laws in Connecticut, when in fact the problem with the court is not enforcing the laws already in place or utilizing them in a manner appropriate or fitting to the crime. And perhaps laws we have could be shored up, not to allow for as much leeway or leniency. Just a suggestion. The diversionary programs, overused, right? Accelerated rehabilitation and special diversionary programs were meant for nonviolent, non-egregious crimes that for offenders that are not likely to reoffend. We've seen them used in violent cases. We've seen them used in hoarding cases. And the result is almost always the same. We have repeat offenders. So accelerated rehabilitation needs to be visited within the system as used in animal cruelty cases. Suspended sentences, at least their convictions, they leave a record. That's a step in the right direction, for lesser offenses, but not for violent cases, or cases that have resulted in the death of an animal. It's simply not appropriate. And without meaningful consequences, offenders repeat their crimes. I mean, it's a common thread. We recently watched Josephine Ragland walk out of court with a smile on her face. She received a suspended sentence. And, she was convicted of cruelty after a client's dog died in her care. And additionally, she is facing other similar charges in California. The education programs. There's almost none. There's one that we know of. The option is the BARC program, B-A-R-C. It's a 4 to 16-hour course, depending on the court's order. It's available, however, rarely used when sentences are being handed down. I can only remember it may use being, I don't know, maybe twice a judge handed that down. The website, if you're interested, is courseforanimalcruelty.com. Again, without accountability, we will continue to see a high rate of reoccurrence. Next. Okay, so this is the data, our data with outcomes. You'll see the red is diversionary programs, which is just spiked in 2025. The yellow are cases dismissed, orange is nollie, green are suspended sentences, that's down in 25, and the blue is incarceration. Nearly every incarceration is due to multiple charges that are not animal cruelty, that are, that have happened within the case. So the takeaway is clear. Most cases do not result in meaningful consequences. Therefore, we're going to see this occur. We're going to see animal cruelty repeat itself. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. However, we are committed to, and we remain committed to, raising awareness. Next. We are committed to raising awareness, educating the public, educating the court system, keeping people informed about legislation, and teaching communities how to recognize animal cruelty. We will continue to advocate for stronger protection laws for animals and who we recognize as sentient beings. Get involved. Join us at court. Our presence makes a significant difference in adjudication. And always be a voice for the voiceless. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram and join us in the fight against animal cruelty. Next. There's our website and how to become a member, our mailing list. And thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Zilla attorney, Joyce Glass and Joshua. Definitely some moving content here. We did capture a few possible next steps and research here. I think we need to look at educate on why accelerated rehabilitation is not suited for most animal cruelty cases because of the high recidivism and a link of violence that we talked about. Expanding Desmond's law to provide advocacy for more animals, as we heard about this evening. Expand and improve upon Connecticut's animal cruelty education program, which Zilla was just talking about. Seek to mandate for those convicted of relative related crimes or for those who apply for diversionary programs. Research other national programs. We just heard about BARC, the Connecticut Humane Society's Animal Welfare University, Court Counseling Institute Animal Cruelty. So we have some research to do. Expand animal cruelty laws, educational programming, the judicial system, judges, prosecutors. We're looking at putting together a resource guide, also known as bench tools, for judges and prosecutors and lawyers, probation officers, etc., with a lot of the information you heard this evening, and really educate on the link. And some of the numbers we heard this evening, staggering statistics, and some of the photos we saw, very, very moving. Colette, anything you'd like to add?
I'd also like to thank our speakers and really for helping to bring these issues to light. I think it may seem second nature or obvious, but indeed, I think that it isn't quite as obvious as people think. And understanding the link of violence is just critical for a better understanding of how to deal with this and why it's so important to take seriously these acts of cruelty against animals.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Thank you, Colette. I know we do have a few minutes here. We do have a couple Q&As that have been loaded in, so I would ask the panel. I'm going to read a couple of questions here, and I ask you to jump in where and when you can. We do have one member who has submitted a question here. They used to have a child in animal law practice in Colorado. They used to go into homes of children that they represented who were in the custody of human services. There were occasions when this individual observed a suspected or obviously abused or neglected animal in the home and did reach out to workers and others in Connecticut, to authorities to investigate and assist. The question is, can DCF workers and others in Connecticut be trained to identify suspected animal abuse when they are in the home? Thoughts on that from the panel?
I'll jump in on that. So DCF, the agencies that do go into the home, I wouldn't say so much that they're trained on it, but they do report it. So it's not a matter of them looking for it. If there's an animal in the home and they are investigating, they report it. And then from there, it's investigated by either Department of Agriculture or the individual township animal control officer.
Thank you, Attorney Glass. We also have a question here from a member. Is a mental health evaluation or assessment required in these cases? No, Attorney Glass.
Unfortunately not.
Okay. Also, same individual is asking, is there a violent animal offender registry in Connecticut?
There is not. I actually did a nationwide study on this in 2022, 2023. And there are many animal abuser registries around the country. There's only 2 states that have them. Connecticut voted it down at the time that it was proposed. And I did speak to some of the people involved in it. And what's interesting is when I did the nationwide study, there were, I think, 28 registries at the time, and there was only one state then. Florida just got added. And in any of those 28 municipalities in the one state, it was a zero cost because all they do is they add the tab to their website or municipal website, and it's reported. Zero cost. So in Connecticut, they said, well, there would have been a cost of several $100,000s a year. And I said, well, where did you get that from? And they could not, the person that I spoke to could not tell me where they got that number from. But there is not one in Connecticut. I know people have differing opinions about them. I can tell you that when they're enforced properly, they do work. Suffolk County, New York has one that has been enforced. And when they went to do spot checks, I believe that the statistic for violation was somewhere between 30 and 40%.
Thank you. That was the one on registry. We do have another question here. Do you think that required education prior to being able to get a dog or a cat should be required? I myself feel that absolutely we should have some, and I'm not quite sure this person is going to what type of education, but the ownership of an animal, the commitment, the vet costs, all of that should definitely be considered. And educational. We do have fact sheets on them, how to choose breeder, how to work with a shelter to find a home and different things, to find an animal, things of that nature. So education is definitely critical, I think, to a lot of this as well. Just looking at other questions here, I want to be cognizant of time. I know we're after 7 already. One individual said maybe the DCF workers should just report that there is an animal in the home, and then DCF would go in. That was one of comment from one of our individuals. Can we start a petition to begin an abuser offender registry? As one of our members is asking. Definitely something we can look at in its totality. I meant animal control would then go in and check on the welfare of the animal. Yes, cross reporting if we can get. And I think Attorney Galatz, you were saying that the agencies are reporting if there is animal abuse and they see an animal, there is some cross-agency reporting going on back and forth.
Yeah, there definitely is. And we've spoken with DCF. There is a contact person there. And I will say that they have been pretty responsive. They do keep statistics on the number of reports that they get and then what turns into a report on their end. So it is a good system.
I would say in the past few years, this has really kicked in. People know about it now. The agencies are now aware of it, and it's definitely working in that respect.
Excellent. Another question we have here: what is needed for someone to become a courtroom animal advocate?
So you have to be an attorney registered in Connecticut. You contact Department of Ag and get your name added to the list. And then you can you make a request in a particular case. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Desmond's Army for some guidance on that.
Excellent. Good question. And being cognizant of the time and everything here, we do have a final question here. Can we exempt animal cruelty to AR?
Oh, in the perfect world. We can try, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we are wrapping up here. That is the last of the questions that I'm seeing from our members. So thank you so much for engaging with us and submitting members for our panel. Colette, any final words that you would like here? I do want to just quickly thank Joshua again and Attorney Joyce Glass and Zilla. And I do also want to make sure I thank our educational webinar sponsor, the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut as well too. So without all of you and our sponsorship this evening would not have taken place. But a lot of information, a lot of things to think about here, a lot of potential next steps. And Colette, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks to you for all you do to promote education. We are an educational organization, and we feel that education is the key to learning and better understanding. And from learning, I think we can helpfully help facilitate change and make a difference in the lives of animals. I want to thank all of our attendees. We really appreciate your advocacy and your concern. We assume you joined because you also are concerned with the issues related to animals and cruelty. So thank you all for being with us. And thanks again to our panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Colette. And lastly, please see the QR code up there. Please respond to the post-webinar survey. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. Lots of different questions on the survey real quick. So please, when that does come in to your inbox from this evening, we had over 160 individuals registered for this evening. And this video will go out on our library, and it will be shared with our membership and also put out through our social media. So tonight's presentation will reach upwards of 10,000 individuals across Connecticut. So some important messaging here, and all of us coming together for animals. And I truly feel that through education and coming together, we can make a difference here in Connecticut. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, our panel members. Thank you, Colette, our board chair, and the CFA board, and all of our members that joined us this evening. Without you, none of this would be possible to speak up for animals that have no voice. So thank you, everyone, and everyone have a good evening.